Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. Welcome to the podcast. Today I have a guest that's been on the podcast a few times before. Usually I get the number wrong. I think it's 4 or 5. He will correct me as usual, but he's always a fun guy to talk to, become a friend of mine, Nikola Aracic from Intuitive Tennis. So how are you today, Nikola?
I'm doing good, Jonas. Thank you for having me on again. I actually don't know what number this is. I think it's 4.
Yeah, it's 4, probably 4. I would say 4, maybe 5, but yeah, that's it.
Because we did one that was like a monster one. They just split up in 2. It was like 4 hours, I think. That was insane.
Nuts.
So that counts as 1. But if you want to count that one as 2, this is the 5th one.
Yeah, that can be counted as 4 really by normal podcast. Usually my podcasts are 1 hour, but it's easy to get into the weeds, especially we can get to talk tennis, you go crazy, you start like blah, 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 blah. And you follow everything tennis as well. So you always have opinions on topics, which makes my life as an interviewer easier, right? But now I guess we can kickstart. Like I know you have many fans out there and probably some like that's overlapping and listening also to the podcast. And you've been doing something interesting and something frustrating, which I think the audience will relate to and be interested in. And that's you've been looking for your next racket. And it's been, I've been watching your videos. They're very entertaining. The way you comment on like after one shot and stuff like this, I think people really like them. So where are you at the moment and why did this start?
I'm in a really bad place, racket-wise. I am living in my absolute nightmare right now. I went through this the last time I switched from my Wilson Hyperhammer 5.2. And it took me forever to settle on the bevel at Pure Drive Plus. It was probably like 6 months. I'm very picky with rackets. So the way this started, I love the bevel at Pure Drive Plus rackets. But I painted my racket white. It's a whole saga. I mean, I explained it on my channel. But in any case, I painted the racket white. And it started playing different. Because it was heavier, but it's not only that. Because the racket is really old. And Jonas, maybe you can explain this a little bit better, but don't you agree that rackets, when they get older, they start playing differently? What is your opinion on that? Because that racket, when did that version of the bevel at Pure Drive come out? It was the one that didn't have the Cortex system on the outside. Was that 2017 or 2016? Do you remember?
18. It was the 2018 version. So I probably came out like January 2018 or something.
2018. Yeah. So that racket, 6 years old. So I think that is part of the reason why it doesn't play right anymore. It's just been played with too many times because I bought those rackets, some of those rackets off eBay, some, broke and all that. And it's been the same 3 rackets actually strung over and over again. And I think after a while, when you play with the same racket, it starts wearing off,
Yeah, that's what you see. And there was a famous story with Del Potro that kind of explains it. Like he did not, maybe a little bit of a superstition, but he did not want to relinquish his K-factor cosmetic of his racket, like the Hyper. He used also the Hyper, but the Pro Staff 6195, right? And he did not want to let that go because of that cosmetic and the way they had broken down. So the graphite breaks down, the fibers break down after more than hitting, just also stringing. So the more you string the racket, the more, the pros, they string all the time. You play a lot, you string all the time. The racket starts breaking down slowly. If you're a rec player that play with the same multi-filament or, use a poly for 6 months before you restring, which is not recommended, but let's just talk about that, then you are fine. Your racket can last for probably 20 years because you're not hitting that many balls. You're playing maybe once or twice a week. But if you're a competitive guy, you're playing 5 times a week, you're coaching, you're hitting a lot of balls, and you're stringing, it's going to break down. And then the racket is going to play softer. So, like, you're not going to get the same power. You're not going to get the same crispness. It's going to become more dead over time. And Del Potro, he liked it because they became softer. So he didn't want to let them go. He played them until they had, like, nothing left. Like, there was nothing left. And then he had to get new frames. And then he kind of forced Wilson. He's a nice guy, but it sounds like he forced them. But he had his racket strung 20 times without touching them, right? So just to break down a little bit of that initial stiffness, he wanted them to be a little bit softer than the original stiffness. So that shows what's one story showing you how that works. Yeah.
This is why I call you the GOAT of the racket world. Yeah. Look,
nerd.
that was my thought as well, that the stringing is the worst for the racket. And my rackets have been strung a lot. And it simply didn't play well. Also, on top of that, it's super challenging for me regarding my technique to have an extended racket, and the Pure Drive Plus was 27.5 inches. And I love certain aspects of playing with an extended racket, but it hurts my game in other ways because it makes the racket less maneuverable. So I found that towards the end, playing with that wide racket, I started playing worse and worse, and my forehand started getting worse and worse. And then I decided, you know what? I need a new racket. That's when I did the wide racket reveal video, and I started a series. And I've been testing a ton of rackets since then. I have a list here so I don't forget any. I tested the Yonex E-Zone, Wilson RF, the new one, Wilson Shift, Diadem, Wilson Blade, Yonex Percept, Head Speed, Head Boom, the Dunlop FX500, the Wilson Ultra, which is my latest release on YouTube, and then the Solinco Whiteout and Blackout that's available on intuitivetennis.com that has not been yet released on YouTube. So there's been a lot of rackets that I've tested, and I did like some. So what I did with this series, I decided to select my favorite rackets and then feature them in a final play test where I'm then going to select my new racket. When that's going to be, I have no idea, because I still have not found one racket that I'm in love with, because I've learned so much through this play test. And for example, day form is a super tricky thing regarding rackets. Have you ever had the sensation of like loving a racket on a specific day and then coming back the next day and the racket doesn't feel good anymore? Have you ever had that?
Yeah, all the time. Like usually, like you get different lengths of a honeymoon period. So like it can play well for you for like a week because you're on that week, or you're physically feeling great, or something is going right in your life, whatever. Like you're riding a high. But it could also be like on and off. So yeah, you're feeling great one day, next day you're not so great. Then the third day you're playing okay. Then the fourth day you're not so great again. Then you play great the fifth day. So it's like it requires quite a long period of time to evaluate if it's for you. When you have that like initial I love it, you're gonna still go through a lot of bumps. Like it's gonna be a bumpy ride. Like you're gonna play a match and you're gonna play horrible. So that's the tough thing with rackets. Like even for the pros that I deal with, sometimes it's like, oh, I loved it, and then, oh, I didn't play well today when I played a training match, and then there's, I loved it again, and then it's like down again. So, and you can easily lose your confidence and then go back to your other racket. That's so easy.
It's so true. And it's been very extreme with me, where I'm playing a lot better than I usually play with a certain racket. And then I try that same racket the very next day, and it feels horrible. I've had this with several rackets that I've tried, and that's what makes it confusing. And I agree with you that sometimes you just have to stick with the racket and tough out those off days. And the initial feeling that you have with the racket is an important consideration to make, but it's just so weird what's been happening. But I'm not giving up on those rackets that I initially liked. I am going to continue to try them. But just to give you one example, because it's a video that's already been released. So I love the shift in my initial hitting session. I loved the shift when I was playing points with it. And then I loved it for about a week. I thought this is going to be it. This racket is so great for my forehand. They call it the ultimate spin racket, and it does really help with spin. No doubt about it. Like my forehand improved a lot. My serve got a little bit worse, but I really liked the way my forehand felt. But then after about a week, it started feeling worse and worse and worse. So then I started thinking maybe my strings are not working in this racket. I started trying different strings in there, and it just, for whatever the reason, I fell out of love a little bit with the shift. I'm not giving up on it. I'm still going to feature it in the final play test, and it could be a racket that I could choose, but it's just so weird. It's hard to explain, really.
Yeah, I mean, the way it works is like some rackets work with certain strings, some rackets don't work with other strings, which adds
Yeah.
like an extra layer of complexity to all this testing. Because like the
Sure.
shift, for example, maybe if you have to a softer string, it doesn't really give you that like nice bite that you want on the ball, which is this vertical bending of the racket it's supposed to give you. And then you add maybe
Yeah.
like a 4G, it plays super nice, it's like a stiffer string, you can drop the tension a bit. So it's
Yeah.
like that adds the complexity because you want to find the fit of the racket with you and also about the racket and the string with you, right? So it's like it's not only one factor, which makes this whole testing and demoing tough.
Look, the complexity lies in the individual preferences. That's going to be obviously different for everyone. And also, one thing that I've known before and that confirmed what I thought was accurate is that muscle memory plays a huge factor in rackets. So there was one period of time where I was just for fun playing with the Gamma Bubba. I know you tried it on your channel. You tried the 137, right?
Yeah. Well, when I went to we're one day in the Tennis Warehouse trip where we went to some cool country club. I think Chris from Tennis Warehouse, he brought it, so I got to hit with it for like a good
California.
hour. Yeah, well, I
California, right?
like the racket. Like it's a fun I like these extreme rackets. Like I have few on the bed as well, but it's like extreme rackets. I like the challenge of like how do I adapt to playing with this thing because it's quite extreme. So and that actually makes tennis quite fun.
It does. Well, I know you were in California. Too bad you didn't stop off in Florida. I thought you might come visit me. But
March, hopefully.
anyway, yeah. All right. And also, we were almost got together in Europe. That's going to be something we have to do maybe in 2025.
It will
Get
happen for sure.
together.
I'm pretty sure about March. I'm feeling it. So.
That's awesome. But anyway, so I was playing around with the Bubba 137. I made a video with it. This was in 2022, I think. And it was such a fun racket to play with, like you said. But it wasn't, obviously, it was kind of extreme, so I couldn't really choose that as my racket. It was just not enough control for me. But then Gamma sent me the Bubba 117. Do you know that racket?
Yeah, I never hit it with it though, but I've seen it. It's a little bit more of a mellowed out Bubba, right?
Yeah, really mellowed out. It's a 117 racket head size, and it's 250 grams static weight.
Wow, crazy.
So that's like the ultimate teaching racket. I loved teaching lessons with that thing because it's so easy to feed the ball. And on occasion, I would even play points with that thing with my students. So I fell in love with teaching with the Gamma 117 Bubba. And then what started happening, because that racket was so unbelievably light, that when I grabbed my normal racket, my racket felt unbelievably heavy. And I had a hard time initially getting any depth of my shots. So the muscle memory is so unbelievable. Like the way you get used to a racket and then you jump onto the next racket has a huge effect on that next racket. And the way I'm doing these plate tests, I will usually have 3 or 4 rackets that I'm testing with different specs. And I'm switching from one to the other. I'll go from the lightest one to the heaviest one, or I'll go from the heaviest one to the lightest one. And then I'll mix in between. And it's incredible how your feeling changes based on the previous racket that you use. Just one example, I was playing with the Solinko recently, and I was playing with the 290, and it felt really good initially. Then I played with I think it was a 300, and that one felt a little bit better because there was a little bit more mass there, a little bit more stability at contact. Then I went to the 300 XTD, and that one was a little bit less maneuverable, but I felt more power, especially on my serve. Now, when I was playing with the 300, my serve was feeling amazing because I had just come back from the 290. So I thought that racket was unbelievable for the serve. Okay. So then I went from the 300 to the 300 XCD, and I felt the serve was even better with the XCD. And then I went back to the 300, and my serve started feeling horrible. So you see where your mind can start playing unbelievable tricks on you. Like maybe 20 minutes before, I thought that the 300 blackout was unbelievable for my serve. And then 20 minutes later, I'm thinking that the 300 is awful for my serve, just based on the racket that I was using prior to using the 300. And that's where it gets super tricky with rackets,
Yeah, and you went to like an extended version, which on serves is generally like a little bit of a cheat code, right? Like you're gonna get extra pop with the
Yeah.
extended frame.
Well, it depends on what kind of serve you're hitting. So with an extended racket, the flat serve is going to be helped, but you're going to see a disadvantage on the kick and maybe even on the slice. So that's where a more maneuverable racket will actually help you on the kick serve. But I like to serve flat, my first serve. And I sometimes will go 2 first serves. So I like the extension on my serve. I do. But it doesn't really help my kick serve, though. So that's where it gets like super tricky, Same with my forehand. When you need more maneuverability, that's where the extended racket doesn't really do you any favors. So this is going to be like the most difficult thing when it comes to choosing a racket for me is what am I willing to sacrifice? Am I going to sacrifice my serve a little bit, or I'm going to sacrifice my forehand control a little bit? Because with an extended racket or with a really powerful racket, my forehand has a tendency to flatten out. So the racket needs to be maneuverable so that I can have the ability to put a little bit more spin on my forehand, which also helps my kick serve, but it takes a little bit away from my flat serve. And therein lies the challenge, figure out, what to sacrifice or to hopefully find something that works well for both. I haven't quite found that yet.
Yeah, you're always gonna compromise on something. Like that's the issue with rackets. Like it's you're not gonna find a perfect racket because it doesn't exist for anyone, right? So you're gonna have to make a distinction where, like, okay, I talked to Railo Pelka's coach a while back when before he got injured about switching rackets, and he was testing a bunch of rackets, Riley. And obviously with his game, if he changes like one racket and his serve is, he said that even like, if my serve is 1% less good, I cannot play with that racket because he makes, he plays tennis for a living, right? And if his ace count is going down or his like the potential of his first serve is down, then there's no chance, even if he can rally better or like hit more forehand winners, because that's not going to be his game. But for like a rec player or someone who plays club matches and stuff, I tend to think that it's better to make sure that your weakness is not as weak. Like overall, like if you can have a more versatile game, I think overall this would benefit you in the long run. So of course, if you want to have the biggest forehand ever and then your backhand is crap and you can run around it, but I generally feel like the racket that makes you a more balanced and like versatile player is going to be better for you or in the long run. That's generally my feeling.
I agree 100%. And of course, it's going to be different for each individual player, even at the recreational level. There are going to be some recreational players that can pull off rackets that I can't even pull off. And there's going to be probably a bigger group of rec players who are going to benefit tremendously from a more maneuverable racket and a more responsive racket in my experience. But I want to get back to your story about Railo Pelka, which was super interesting about the 1% difference. And I made a video in 2021 or 22 about racket recommendations. And that video did really well. It got over 400,000 views. And in that video, I did a little test between the Pure Drive and the Air from Babylon. And I said that there's no difference in my game when I play with either one of these rackets. If you watch me play, you will not be able to spot a difference in my game. Everything's going to look the same. There might be a small difference in my performance, like you said with Opelka, 1%. But what we do as tennis players is we take that 1% and we exaggerate it. So when I grab a racket and I'm feeling maybe 1% less power in my head, this seems more like 25% or 30%. And I start becoming negative about the racket right away, which then has a psychological effect on your serve and the rest of the game where you start playing worse. And therein lies the issue with rackets, that a lot of players will exaggerate these small differences in specs and make them more important as they are in reality. Because this is absolute fact that when you take two rackets that are similar in specs, it's going to be impossible for someone to detect a difference in your game. It's going to be impossible.
Yeah, it's very tough. Like, and we're, like you say, magnifying everything that's happening on the tennis court, and we're emotional beings, right? So we add emotions to everything that's happening. We're not looking at data. So if we had like when pro players do racket testing and they have like Hawkeye, or they have some system, Wingfield, whatever, to measure how hard they hit and how many errors they make, blah 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 blah, well, how much they get on the serve. Usually, it's very small percentages based on some different spec changes, different layup in the racket, or different mold. But in our head, we're like, I cannot play with this racket. But we're actually playing. If we would look at a long period of stats, we would see it's like super small difference. But in our heads, it's
Exactly.
huge. Like, so you always have to try to go outside your body, even after a session, and be like, what really happened, and like look from above, It's
I'm
tough.
going to try this. I'm going to go outside my body in the next play test. I'm going to look at myself from above, and I'm going to tell myself, what are you doing?
You're filming yourself, so
What
it's a
is
little bit
this?
easier, right? Like, I mean, in what that
Yeah,
sense, like
sure.
you're filming yourself, right?
Of course. But I've said this before on your podcast. I'm always envious of players that can just pick up any racket and play their game, and they don't care at all. I'm sure you know players like this. I know players who play pro level, and they don't care. They'll play with any string, any racket. And I wish I was like that, but I'm not, and I think most people are not. Most people fall into these mental traps regarding tennis equipment. And I'm not saying by any means that racket specs do not matter. I'm specifically saying small differences in racket specs. So I did a super interesting video with Shamir where we tested 4 percepts. We tested the percept 100, let me try to remember. Yeah, percept 100, 97, the 97D, and the 97A. And as you know, Jonas, there are huge differences in specs between those 4 rackets, especially the 100 and the H. I think there is like a 30-gram difference in static weight. And that, I do think, is going to reflect on the game more. So when there are huge differences in racket specs, you're going to see a bigger difference in your game. For example, playing with the Gamma Baba, 137 square inch racket size. Your game will absolutely change when you play with that racket, or when you play with that weed. So huge differences will have an impact. Small differences don't have as much of an impact. And unfortunately, they can get in your head. And that's what makes picking a new racket very tough for some players, including myself.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, so today I had a session with my buddy Adri, who is a coach. He was coach for Safiulin, like was joining him last year, and now he coaches some other good players, and plays high level. He played futures before, stuff like this. So still a young guy. He plays well. So we were playing today. I brought a bunch of rackets. I've made my racket choice for next year already, so I'm pretty happy with like how I'm playing right now. For me, it's so much
Is
easier
this
now.
something
Tennis. Sorry?
Sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry to cut you off. Is this something you revealed? What's your
No, I
racket?
haven't. Like,
It's a Babel.
I've replied to comments, but I haven't made a video about it. It's not.
You play with the 98 Aero, no?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. I'm really like enjoying my tennis now, because I'm always switching. I'm playing so bad, and now I'm like with one racket. I'm like, oh, I'm so much better now. It's just crazy. It's like funny how because your muscle memory works better, right?
We talked about this in private, and it's gonna be absolutely impossible to play with multiple rackets. I think there is one caveat there. There are some players. Remember Juan Balcells?
Yeah, I recognize that. Yeah.
He had 2 different rackets, one for the serve game, one for the return game, and he used to leave one racket by the back fence, between the serve game and the return game.
There's
and also
Maxime
French
Cressy
guy.
as well. Yeah.
Oh, Cressy as well. But there was another French doubles player, double specialist, who played with the arrow and the pure drive, and he would swap between them. I think he used the arrow for the return and the pure drive for the serve.
That's funny.
So that makes a lot of sense. So that is one caveat. I can see how that might work. It'll be super tedious to do this, and you might forget one time, and it would get complicated. But I think it's a big mistake when I see students of mine and they roll up to the court and they have like 3 or 4 different rackets by choice. Yeah, not because accidentally they have a couple of old ones in case the string breaks. That's fine. No, they by choice have 4 brand new rackets that are all different, and that's not good. That's not good at all. You have to have one racket where you can build the muscle memory. As I explained earlier, your mind is going to play tricks on you when you go from one to the other. It's going to be unbelievably confusing and it's no good. And you've told me this before that you struggle with this because this is your job. And now I'm experiencing this and just finding a new racket series because I plan to play more and feature some of my matches in 2025 once I have selected a racket, because I played some matches and I have no idea what to play with. I come on the court, I have like 4 different rackets, and I'm like, what am I going to play with? I'm going to play with the shift, the percept. What am I going to do? I have no idea what to play with now. I just randomly start grabbing rackets. And then I made a video about this on my YouTube channel. The thumbnail was, why did I do this? You know? And because like I played a match and I made so many dumb decisions, like swapping rackets after missing just 2 balls when I was playing well. And it created a whole nightmare scenario. So it is not fun to have multiple rackets, because what you're going to do by having only one racket and sticking with that racket as long as possible, you're going to take the actual racket out of your mind as a reason for you doing poorly on the court. And that's going to be key, because naturally we as players, you know, when we had just maybe switched the racket, we miss a ball, the thought immediately goes to the racket and we look on the strength, this racket is awful, where it probably had nothing to do with the racket. And I openly talk about this in my videos, when I miss a ball. Was this me or was this the racket? It's kind of hard to figure out. So yeah, long story short, super important not to have different rackets and then swap between them. Unless you are a racket collector, and I know many of them. I'm certainly one, you are one. That's different, just to play for fun with a racket or display it on a wall or whatever. That's different. But if you want to maximize your tennis game, one racket is going to be key.
Yeah, I agree. I've been on and off, like I've done videos about like having maybe like a match ready racket, like a list of like 3 rackets and stuff like this. But I did latest, I did like maybe 2 rackets, one with a bit more control and one with a bit more power. But overall, now that I'm playing with one for the first time in a long time, and I've been through that hell many years now that you're describing, I know it really too well. Like I played UTR matches, ITF matches, and I bring 5 rackets and I play with all of them in one match, And you're like, you're thinking, I am insane, something is wrong.
How do you play when you go through something like that?
I play usually poorly. Like I always tend to, like, if you go to the match and you're not sure which racket you're going to play your first set with, like this happened to me. I have 5 different rackets and I almost always lose the first set. And then even in a match, okay, let's say it's a 60-40, I'm winning, or 50-50. Then the second set's going to, maybe I change, I'm going to struggle. Then I change again. And then at some point when I find my racket, I've been able to turn it around, but it's become like a crazy match, like a 3rd set tiebreak win or something. And I've also lost matches where I want to quit tennis because I'm bringing 5 rackets. I feel like an idiot. I look like an idiot. I play like an idiot. So it's just like complete meltdown. You just want to burn the whole bag of rackets. It's not good. It's not funny. Like I'd rather go there and lose like a normal person with 1 racket and be like, okay, he outplayed me. It was a bad day. Fine.
Exactly. But I want to just add one more thing. While it's awful to have multiple rackets, as you explained, I think it's good to have different tensions if you have multiple rackets. So that's something that I think is going to be very useful, to have your normal tension. And then maybe if you have 4 rackets, to have one that's just a tad looser and one that's just a tad tighter, in case you need to adjust the tension to the conditions that you're playing in, because conditions might be slow. It might be, fizzling a little bit, balls getting soaked up. Maybe you want to have a looser string, or balls are flying for whatever reason. You want to maybe have a tighter string. But I don't really think it's a good idea to have different type of string on the same racket. I think that goes in the same category as having different rackets. That's gonna be tough, because then you're gonna be obsessing on the strengths and the differences between them and putting blame on that.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, and it's something I've thought about as well. Like I tried having several different string setups, meaning different strings, and I know pros sometimes try this, like especially off season, they do it, and it creates like this all the same situation. Like you start doubting, like, well, this string doesn't feel right. This string is maybe better.
Oh, yeah.
But I
Which,
do, like you said, I have 4 now rackets, and I have a slight, like one, like 2 with base tension. I want a little bit higher and one a little bit lower. So if I play like a set or something, I'm feeling like I need more help, I go the lower tension. I have to
exactly.
control the ball better. I get the higher tension, and that's been
Exactly.
good. That's what I
That's
like.
so important. And I've been doing that forever because very often I come out there and I just need more control. And I usually go for a little higher tension one. And then also sometimes I feel like I need the string to help me a little bit and go for the looser one. So to have that luxury, I think is worth it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I really would recommend, like, if you're serious about your game, get like a 4 of the same racket, and then call it a day, and get 1 reel of string, and you're good. One thing I was gonna add about like Adri that we played today. So I brought some funny rackets. Let me see if I have one here. So one of them you will feel like a Baba to you a bit. It's
I
115.
saw this stuff. I follow you on Instagram, Jonas, and
Yeah.
I've watched
So
all your videos on YouTube. I saw it. What's it called? What's that called again?
it's called a Zenith 1.
That's right.
But
It
it's
looks
not like
weird.
a Baba because it's a thin beam in a 2021 string pattern. So it's like a frying pan prestige, I call it. Like a more controlled racket, but it's like more forgiving.
What's the racket head size?
115.
100
So
and what?
15 square inches.
15. I thought you said 150.
Now that would be
That's
cool, but it would be illegal.
like-
No, so for example, like I played with Adri today, and he's thinking about switching rackets, like because he's playing
Okay.
UTRs, like serious UTRs, like
Okay,
with
got
some,
it.
ATP ranked players and stuff. He's playing with the Boom Pro, and he wanted to try, can I get more power? Should I go 100 square inch?
Nice.
But he's a guy who can, like, he has the same stroke with every racket. So I gave him this crazy racket to start with, and he was like, oh, this is much better than I expected. He played still quite well. He didn't miss a ball in the beginning. But then, like, as soon as we started playing points, I could see, I told him, like, okay, now I'm seeing what's happening, because your muscle memory acts more when you're hitting from the baseline, you can play with whatever, right? But as soon as you play points, your muscle memory kicks in, and then that's when the racket starts. If the racket has it's not something you're used to, that's when things starts falling to pieces, And I saw it even in his game, although he is one of those guys that can just, I give him a racket, same strokes, puts the ball in, talented, and it seems to work for him. But then with the points, I noticed it's a little bit of a difference. And then he went to like normal rackets and like the new Technifiber, like the Arrow. But I saw like, okay, this is what he plays the best with. Like it's quite clear, even if he can switch.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I would have never done this series without featuring real point play and actually keeping score on the points. And I talked about this during my Dunlop FX 500 review. I do think that points are the most important thing when it comes to testing rackets, and they're going to reveal everything because you're going to be forced into emergency situations and your game is going to be tested for real. But I still like to gain an initial impression of a racket because that's going to allow me to disregard a racket right off the bat. Some rackets are just not going to be suited to you. Maybe they're going to be too heavy. And so let's say that you go straight into point play with a racket that's maybe dangerous for you to use where you can possibly get hurt. I think you can avoid that by gaining a first impression and, deciding whether this is something that you can try out further in point play. But I want to come back to one more thing you said about, what's it called again? The Zenith?
Zenith,
yeah. Zenith.
Yeah.
It was 115, you said, or 117?
And 2021.
So what I find, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, there was a period of time where oversized rackets were super popular in the knees. Remember that time? And a lot of players were playing with 110.
Yeah,
I even played
I
with
think
110 juniors.
Shang, Agassi, some women players. I wouldn't say maybe super popular, but it was a lot more popular. Like there were some pros playing. Like nowadays, there's 0 pros playing with oversized rackets.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So that I even play with 110, and I find now you rarely, if ever, see anybody use anything above 100. I mean, Serena 4, right? But it's hard to find somebody using a racket over 100. So I do think that having tested the bubble rackets and also having tested the weed, you know what the weed is?
Yeah, I've heard about it, but I never hit it.
Oh, you have to try it, Jonas. It's 135. 135 square inches. Also has a thin beam.
Oh,
it looks like a frying pan.
Yeah, it's similar to this
weed,
one in a way, right? Then, yeah.
The weed is an incredible racket. But anyway, those rackets are fun. But when you start hitting hard and you start blasting the ball, the control is atrocious with a racket of that head size, just because the sweet spot is too large and you just can't control the ball properly. Now, I know people are going to put in the comments, there's a pro player, a double specialist who uses the Bubba 137. So I do think it's possible that somebody could get used to it and can control a racket like that. But I think the vast majority of people, while you do get more power, there's a lot to gain from playing with the larger racket head size. You know, it's easier to make contact, obviously. The control suffers. And I think it's for that reason that we're seeing a shift away from those oversized rackets, 110. And I think like 100 is possibly the optimal racket head size to play with, you know, for the most amount of people.
Yeah, it's narrowed down completely. Like now we don't even see 97s. We see a few 95s still, like with Novak and Medvedev, sure. Maybe these, but these are very specific players. I mean, Fritz still playing a 95, which maybe is a bit odd, but he has such leverage in his arms. But overall, like 98 to 100 are the head sizes. You know, like that's, if you look at the pro tours, WTA, ATP, down to futures, I mean, there's no players almost like zero, like the percentage is like in a 0 point something.
That's right.
Of players playing not 98 or 100 almost. So
do you know anyone except Serena that's like, Serena was 104, right?
She ended her career with 102. Like they even reduced her head size a bit. That was her last.
What about Venus?
Yeah.
What about Venus?
She's still 104, I think. Yeah.
104. Yeah. So I don't know anyone except those two. Like, do you know anyone except them that use larger than 100?
I cannot think of one. I mean, there might be some WTA player I'm not familiar with, but like off the top of my head, following tennis pretty closely, no, I cannot think of.
So that's my point with those larger racket sizes. They're super fun to play with, and it's so fun to like volley with them, you know? It's so hard to miss the volley, right? The racket, the string bed is so gigantic, you know? That's why a lot of the senior players, they love the weed. And when I worked as a coach in Hawaii, there was a lot of people using the weed because they're at the net and the thing is like this big and they can just swat everything away at the net. But so it's super fun to play with, but it's impossible to use for real. Like if you want to maximize your game, you know?
Yeah. It's that's the thing. Like you have to, I noticed that as well. Like you're getting control, like just from hitting, especially with this racket, is very good on the control with 2021 thin beam as well, like similar. And 115 is maybe not as extreme, obviously, as 137, 135 as this weed racket. Right. But still, like, as soon as you're getting into points play, then things get different. And with what we talked about, like the big sweet spot becomes like mushy and a bit tough to like detect where am I hitting. Like, because a big sweet spot is not always good, because a big sweet spot is like inexact, right? Because you're still going to get an erratic response if you're hitting a little bit outside the center of the sweet spot. So people get a bit tricked by this like massive sweet spot, because the sweet spot is the sweet spot pretty much in all rackets. So it gets tricky, that one.
Yeah, so it becomes super important for a super oversized racket how it plays off center, because you're going to be hitting more off center shots. So if the racket is not good off center, and a lot of rackets are not good off center, it's going to be very tough to play with.
So what are you looking for now? Like, you want like something that replaces your drive extended, or do you like something very similar, or you open to like going down in head size, weight? I noticed like in some of your reviews you tended to go towards lighter versions in some cases, where I was surprised, because I think like a 280 gram racket for a player of your level is quite rare to see.
Yeah, I am willing to go lighter, no doubt about it, but I'm also not opposed to playing with a racket that's maybe above my comfort zone. Like I'm open to playing with a racket that's 305, for example. I'm open to it. I can still pull that off, but I feel like I can also pull off a 295 or a 290. But it's going to become very tough, and I'm probably going to need lead tape to make it closer to like 295. So I'm very comfortable with 300 grams. That's what I've been playing with for, I don't know, 20 plus years. That seems to be the optimal static weight for me, but I'm also not opposed to playing with 305. I think I can handle that. But I'm also not opposed to playing with something that's a little bit underneath that. So 295 feels good. 290, it does feel pretty good, but I feel like with 290 or 285, I need to have a little bit of lead tape, because when it's that light, my backhand starts to really flail, and my backhand gets a lot worse when the racket is too light. So that's the range that I'm comfortable in. But yeah, I'm not afraid to go a little bit lighter, like under 300 grams. I'm okay with that, because ultimately you ask me what I'm looking for, and ultimately I'm looking for responsiveness. There are a few shots that give me a lot of information about a racket. For example, if I'm chipping a return or blocking a return, if somebody blasts the ball at my feet and I'm on the baseline, I'm just picking it up. If the racket is giving me a lot in those shots where I'm literally not doing anything, just basically deflecting. So if the racket is popping on those shots, that's the type of racket that I like. Like the most important shot for me, and this is going to sound weird, but as far as testing and knowing whether I'm going to like a racket, if I get a deep ball to my backhand, and if I do a one-handed backhand half volley from behind the baseline, how that particular stroke feels will usually tell me whether I can play with the racket or not. So if I play with, let's say, a head prestige and I do that shot, it feels horrendous. But if I play with pure drive and I do that shot, it feels amazing. So I get a lot more response from the pure drive in that particular shot. I just, pick the ball up, the ball shoots off, and that's the feeling that I'm looking for. So ultimately, I'm looking for a power racket as a responsive racket. But this is going to sound really weird, but I want to still get better at tennis. Like I still train and I want to improve my forehand. My forehand is hard and I can hit it for winners and it's very flat, but I would like to make it heavier and have more spin. And certain rackets help me tremendously with that. The more maneuverable ones, for example, the shift. But there have also been other ones that help me with my forehand. So this is where this finding a racket versus in the past where I was looking for new rackets, it's a little bit different now, because I'm willing to, forgo some of the responsiveness for maneuverability. Let's just put it that way. So I'm open to maybe doing something a little bit different in the future. I think something that can help my game, where maybe I'm giving up, what you brought up with Opelka, I'm giving up 1% of my serve, but I'm gaining maybe 1% of my forehand. I think it's going to feel good, and I'm open to that. But we shall see. We shall see. I don't know yet.
Were there any huge surprises during the different play? I mean, you haven't tested everything in the market. I guess you want to test as much as you can, but is there anything like from a new racket, from a bunch of rackets that you tried from one brand, that surprised you in terms of like, not being like, is it much better or much worse than you thought, but like the way it performed?
Yeah, there's been two rackets that really surprised me. So the racket that surprised me very negatively was the Onyx E-Zone. When I made my wide racket reveal video, that was the number one recommendation that I received from people. Maybe hundreds of people suggested the E-Zone, and it is a phenomenal racket. And my buddy Milan, who is my partner in all finding a new racket videos for the point play, he switched to the E-Zone from the Arrow, and he had used the Pure Drive, and he loved the Pure Drive, didn't like the Arrow so much, and he's transformed as a player ever since he switched to the E-Zone 100. He's playing so much better. His backhand down the line improved tremendously. He's serving well. His forehand got better. He's just playing so much better. And I was super excited to try this one. I thought that they could suit my game, but often in the past, something about the Onyx rackets just feels off. Maybe it's the head size, the head shape, sorry. I don't really know what it is. And I tried the E-Zone and it felt horrible. It did not feel good at all. But then the biggest surprise in the whole series was when I tried the Percept, and I thought I was going to hate it, but I ended up loving it. I fell in love with the Percept 100, and I played incredible, not only with the Percept 100, but I played amazing with pretty much all the perceps except the percept H. That one was a little bit too heavy. And told a story in that, why did I do this video that I released where I'd accidentally grabbed a percept 97D, and I thought it was the regular 97, or I thought it was the 100 actually. I don't remember correctly now. But I ended up playing incredible with that racket, and I had discarded it as not so good a few minutes earlier. So that percept line was an unbelievable surprise to me. That is, in my opinion, one of the best rackets that's ever been made. I don't know what they did to it. I feel like it's a racket that can correct poor form at certain times. Like when you get balls off center, the racket responds incredibly well. I don't know if it has to do with twist weight or I don't know what it is, but off center shots with that racket are magical. So the biggest positive and negative surprise came from Yonex, weirdly.
Yeah, so percept, was it the 100D? Which percept did you like so much?
I didn't test the 100D, and people are mad that I didn't test that one. But I don't really like 18 by 20 string patterns. I think the D is 18 by 20, no?
1819.
Oh, it's 1819. So I don't like a tight string pattern. And I like a 16 by 19 string pattern. So when I have the option, I'm going to always choose the 16 by 19 string pattern. But since people, literally hundreds of people are writing, you should have tried the 100D. You got to try the 100D. I think most people are saying that because of Karu. He uses that, no?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
people
he might switch as well because he wants a bit more power. Like, so I met him, we discussed this in California, right? So,
got it.
And he uses crazy high, like he uses like Agassi style string tension, like 63 pounds, you know? So it's like a board, literally a board.
He can pull it off. But he's an amazing player. He's got a huge fan base, and I think people just want to play with the racket that he plays with.
Yeah, it might be that. It's a good racket. Like I gave it a pretty good review as well. But like I'm a bit like you now because I like a little bit of a help on the racket, like a bit of lift, you know. So
you're turning my way. But anyway, it's not only because of him. I mean, of course, people like that racket because it's a great racket. But what you said with Karu that he needs more power, that's what I'm thinking. You know, I'm probably not going to like it that much. But since so many people suggested it, I might do a video with only the 100D and try it and maybe compare it to the regular 100. We'll see. Maybe do a video, the 100 versus the 100D. And I'll try it just because people want me to try it. But I don't think I'm going to like it. But, you know, one thing that I told myself just to have an open mind and to try without any preconceived notions about rackets and just give each racket a fair shot and just give my honest opinion, you know?
I think this is a very important point that I could dwell on a bit, but it's like going into a testing session with too many preconceived notions, as you said, can really hurt you because like for me, like when I rock up now when I'm playing with the Arrow for like a month or so or a bit longer maybe, people be like, oh, but you tend to hit quite flat, so why are you playing like you should play with a Prestige or a Blade or whatever. Like no, but this actually helps me to have a little bit more lift and to get a bit more free depth, and I feel like I can shorten my swing and be more dangerous. And for me, it's been a game changer for like also playing stronger players. Like, so I think if I ask someone just for advice, I don't think someone would have told me this racket because it's only for spin players. But you need to have an open mind and be like, maybe this will work for me. So I think this is an important point there.
Look, as I said earlier, tennis equipment is about individual preferences, different from other people. And I've told the story before on your podcast. I'll tell it again. When I was in college, you know, I was a Croatian guy with a pretty decent serve, tall guy. And everyone thought I was supposed to play with the Prestige because a lot of people from Croatia play with the Prestige racket, especially back in the day.
And
and a lot of other ones too.
Yeah, of course.
And like I grew up in Germany, and interestingly, a lot of German players play with the Prestige as well. You'll see a ton of German players play with Prestige. So people made that connection. This guy, Croatian guy, came from Germany. He should be playing with a Prestige. He's tall, you know. But that's like literally the worst racket for me, the worst racket. I own one. I think it's a beautiful racket, one of the most legendary rackets of all time. I think in my top 5 rackets video, I ranked it number 2, if I remember correctly, or number 3. or number 4. I don't know. I have to look back at that video, but it definitely was in the top 5. It's a legendary racket. So like what somebody else tells you that you should be using based on preconceived notions, it's not going to work. That recommendation is not going to work. What I did with Shamir that particular day, we did a comprehensive play test with the percepts, let them hit hand feeds, regular feeds. We rallied, live ball. We play out some points. The only thing we didn't do was him playing a set against somebody of his own level. That we should have done that. And that's how you find information about a racket the most accurate way, or what I'm doing with defining my new racket series. If anybody wants to copy this, I think this is a great way to find a racket, actually. Just test a bunch of them, pick different models within each line. You have some options, select the one that you like, put it aside, just go like through the rackets that you want to test that you think are going to be good for you, that you like optically. That's a thing for me. I don't know if it is for other people. I have to like the way a racket looks. It does add to the decision making somewhat. If a racket looks great but plays horrible, I'm not going to choose it just based on the look. But I do think look is important. And then you have your favorite rackets. Maybe there's 4 of them, and then you test within these 4, and think you're going to be able to find one that's going to suit you best. That's what my plan is for me personally, and I think it's a good way to go about it, you know?
Yeah, the tricky thing with that people, get back to me about, and I talk to a lot of people about this, like, they feel like, okay, I can't afford to buy a lot of rackets. I can't, maybe there's no demo program available. If you have
That's
a demo
right.
program,
I hear
sometimes
that a
you
lot,
get shitty strings. So then they rely like on internet reviews, you, me, many other channels and stuff like that. They read Tennis Warehouse, they watch Tennis Warehouse, other tennis retailers. And it's tough because like you said, and I agree 100%, like it's so personal, like that connection you have. Like for some people, it could be like a crazy choice, if you play with the Big Baba, but I wouldn't argue with that because you play with it, you know what you're doing, you like it. It's fine.
right.
It's like a personal connection. Like you choose a girlfriend, you buy a car, like it's just,
Yeah.
oh, this feels good. And I think this emotion of like, this feels right is what you need. I think it's tough to convince yourself to like pick a racket that makes logical sense or that just shows data, because like if you see on the data like, oh, I'm hitting my forehand and it has like 5 miles per hour more with this racket, but it doesn't feel right, you're never going to play with that racket. You want it to feel good in the hand, you want it to feel good on most shots, you want it to be like, this is my racket. That's how important it can be, not for everyone but for many, in this trap. So it's a tricky challenge because it's tough. I think a lot of people get very frustrated when they try 10 rackets, and that's when I get from my consultation stuff, they list the rackets, it's like as many as you have, maybe more, 15 rackets, and I'm like, Jesus, there was 3 of the ones I'm going to suggest in this consultation. He's already tried them all, and he like anything. And sometimes it's just like they want the perfect one, and that's never going to be there, Or it could be just around the corner, but there's no perfect racket. Like that's the issue.
Yeah. In my Silicon Blackout video, I talk about what you said earlier, positive versus negative thoughts about a racket. So it doesn't really have to do with you like missing shots or making shots, but let's just have a scenario where you miss a shot and it feels awful. Like it just doesn't feel right, the ball coming off the racket, versus missing a shot and it feeling okay, even though you missed the shot. That to me is a huge difference. And I have a dialogue in those videos where I talk about this process. And it is also true that, let's say that you are negative about a racket, and let's say that you miss a shot and you say, oh, that felt horrible. That's going to have a psychological effect on you as a player. And there's a chance that you're going to start playing poorly. And of course, it's going to be the racket's fault because you're connecting the negativity to the racket. So it gets super, super tricky that way. As I said, like that racket can play tricks on you, but I think the feel, independent of whether you're making shots or not, the feel is the thing to look for. If it feels good coming off the strings, that's a very good sign.
Did any of the rackets you tried feel better to you, like, but you're not sure about it?
Yeah.
Like, was there one that like
Yeah.
you felt like, okay, this feels good?
Yeah, man. Yeah. There's been a lot that felt amazing. Some I disregarded, but there are right now. Let's see. Let's go through them. So there's the RF Future. That one's still in the running. That felt unbelievable. The RF
Yeah,
Future
goes
is a
good. I
little bit
like
light.
that one too, actually.
It's a little bit lighter.
Despite 280 grams of weight, but
It felt amazing. Okay, then that Shift 300, that one's still in the running. The Percept 100 is still in the running. That was one of the best ones that I tried. And then the Dunlop FX 500 LS is still in the running, but I can't really reveal the other ones because those videos haven't been released yet. So the confusing thing with the Dunlop FX 500 was that I might have gotten a bad racket as a demo because I made a video after testing the Boom and the Dunlop FX 500 where I was swinging the racket blindfolded and I was going to guess which racket it is. Did you see that video? And I guessed everything correct. The Dunlop FX 500, the 300 gram. I messed it up with the FX 500 LS. That's the only mistake I made. So there was something wrong with those two rackets. The weight wasn't right because the 300 felt like the LS and the LS felt like a 300. So the LS didn't really feel like a super light racket. It felt like a 300 gram racket, while the 300 one felt absolutely horrendous. Like I couldn't play with it at all. So that was super confusing. So then a friend of mine, who people know from my channel, Alec, he switched. He played with Dunlop before, but he switched to the FX 500, and it's the 300 gram version. And I tried it. And of course, he plays with strings that I don't necessarily like. It's a Turner string, but it didn't feel right. It did not feel right. Even his that felt more normal in the hand felt like a 300 gram racket. Something about it didn't feel right. So I'm actually unsure about the Dunlop FX 500 situation. I did play really well. I did serve really well with that one. It's a nice racket. A little bit unsure with that one. It's still in the running, but I might have to do some off-camera tests, and might be a chance that I disregard that one because it's so weird with this quality control problems on specific models that I got. But the other ones that I mentioned, they're definitely in the running. There's one more that's in the running that is available. That video is available on the intuitivetennis.com. It's going to be released on YouTube soon. And there's going to be more playtests in January. I'm nowhere near done. I'm nowhere near done. I want to listen because I originally said that I'm going to feature 4 to 5 rackets in the final playtest, but I keep taking rackets out that I said I was going to feature. So we could be at 3 right now. I need 2 more. So I'm going to have to keep testing for a while. This is going to go into January for sure. But I don't want to have this go on too long, though. I want this to end because, like I said, I want to play some matches in 2025, and I want to have a racket to play matches with. So I'm hopeful it ends soon, but it's not going to end in 2024. That's 100% guaranteed.
yeah, it's because it's like you can never have complete peace of mind when you're like always rotating rackets around, and we're both tennis guys, and like you play a lot of tennis, you hit a lot of tennis balls, even if you're just coaching in a sense. But I mean,
Yeah.
you're playing also like sets with Milan and stuff like that, and then not knowing the racket is just like an added frustration to your life. It sounds silly, but it's kind of like that. Like it doesn't make you relax completely.
Well, first of all, teaching, it doesn't matter. I'll teach with anything. When I taught lessons in Hawaii, people would laugh because we had a pro shop there, and my favorite racket to teach with was the Heads TIS6 or what's that called? What's it called?
Yeah, TIS6. You got it, man.
TIS6. That's what I taught with.
The most popular racket among veteran doubles players in history.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Super large racket size, kind of like a Bubba type racket,
Yeah, it's a Bubba from head, but a little bit smaller, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that thing was a dream to hit volleys with and feed. So teaching lessons for me, like I said before, I love the Bubba 117 to teach with. So that really doesn't matter teaching, but playing for real, obviously. That's what this is all about, is playing for real and playing my best tennis. That's what finding a new racket thing is about.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, it's been a huge relief, like after all these years of just like choosing a racket for a period, but then being a little bit like, after a bad match or whatever. And like to feel like now the last month or so, I've been like just playing much better and just enjoying tennis more, like the competitive part of tennis, because I do play matches and stuff every week pretty much. And it's like rocking up with 4 rackets and playing like, crap for one set, maybe winning anyway, or like losing due to like, because you don't know, is it my racket confusing? Is it my head? Is it my game? Is it everything? And it just feels so frustrating. I'd rather just lose, like I said, with one racket. So for me, I feel like happy now going into 2025. And that's how, like, it's a big relief in a way.
That's amazing. I'm happy for you and a little bit jealous. I'm a little bit jealous.
It's been a long journey. Like it's also, I think I've learned so much during this journey, like that's been good in my work,
yes,
or my like the content and stuff. So I think you're learning a lot as well in this
a
journey.
lot.
So it's
Learning a
worth
lot.
doing it. I think if
Yes.
anyone like has the ability to do it and they're curious to do it, they can afford like buying a few, selling here and doing it, because you can always resell pretty decently. You don't lose that much money, but
Of course.
it's fun to do, but it's gonna be frustrating. It's gonna be like training for a marathon or whatever you want to liken it to, but it's gonna have moments where you're like, this is shit, man. I just want to have a racket, and how long can this go on? Because like you need 2 more, for example, for your final decision, and that could be the one. That one of those rackets could be the one. That's always the thought you have. And if we look at January 2025, we're gonna have new rackets from Wilson, new East Zone, new Gravity, which might not be your cup of tea, but the Gravity Pro is worth trying for you, or the Gravity Tour. And then we have new Pure Drive, of course, and we're gonna have new Dunlop SX, so a bit more spinny Dunlop. So it's gonna be so many rackets, new Solinco whiteouts. It's just endless, and then you have more rackets to try.
There's new Solinco whiteouts going out?
Yeah, as well.
When?
Early January, I think. Yeah.
Is that right? Interesting. Very interesting timing. Yeah, no, there are going to be maybe one of those that you mentioned that I might give a shot. One of those that you mentioned. I'm not sure yet. I have to think about it.
I want to, like, because you thought like in my position I would be like, okay, what can I advise or whatever, usually, but it's not. I know in this process it's like you have to have an open mind, and then the answer is usually maybe not what you think it is. Like when you said like you like the future, I'm like, okay, that's a strange choice, but at the same time I also liked it. So that's one of the typical decisions, and then you can always customize it to bump up the weight a bit, and then you have your racket. So it's like you have to have that super open mind.
Yeah, that one I really like, but to be honest, I haven't played with it since. So I'm probably gonna buy that one and then give it another chance. So that's one that could possibly be disregarded. That one. It's just possible. But I did play really well with it, and I did like it a lot. So we'll see. We'll see on that one.
Do you have any issues, like now you play with Bubble for a long time? Like,
I don't know yet. I haven't really made up my mind on that yet. We'll see. We'll see as this playtest continues what happens. I do like one racket a lot more than the others. And there's actually one more that I can't really talk about. It's not released yet, that I also like a lot. So yeah, I don't know yet. We'll have to see how that goes. Maybe. I mean, I'm definitely leaving that as an option, but whether I'm going to do it or not, I don't know yet. We'll see.
Yeah. You're gonna have a busy January for sure. Like it's been busy for me now. Like so many models,
sure.
and sometimes there's incremental changes, but in a few of these cases, it's been like changes I would have chosen myself, right? So in that sense, it's good, and that makes it tougher also, like for me personally. Then, like if I'm committing to this racket now, and I know there's all these rackets coming out, like oh no, maybe some will be good, and then you're back to square one. But luckily, I've tested most of them now, so it's okay. I can rest for a bit, for a few months, So what's your I mean, we're gonna follow your racket journey, like I mean, obviously because it's very entertaining. It's also entertaining to see how frustrating it is for you, because I was in this hell for so long. So it's partly enjoyment for me to someone understands that they can be kind of hellish in a way, although it's fun. But what do you have plans like 2025? Like, you gonna go to any tournaments? You gonna do more content? What's like your big? Do you have any like big plans for next year?
I don't know if I'm going to go to any tournaments, but I do plan to release good content. That's my wish. I'm going to do a lot of match play in 2025. I'm going to feature a lot more matches with coaching. I'm also going to try to play matches if my body holds up. And I'm going to do lessons with students. I'm going to continue with that as I've been doing for a while. I'm also going to continue to cover professional tennis and offer my analysis there. That's something that I like to do. It's very educational for me, and it leads to other avenues, watching very closely the technique of the pros and analyzing their game. I think it's a good thing to do as a coach. You learn a lot. So I'm going to continue to cover professional tennis, make videos about that. And of course, hopefully find a new racket very early next year. That's my plan.
Do you see like a trend? I mean, I guess so. In a case like the match play thing, like we have Winston Do is doing very well with match play like videos, and do you see that that's a thing that people want to watch overall, like more points, more actual points play?
So look, it's so hard to say. Winston is doing fantastic. He just hit the K. I'm a big fan of the Winston Do tennis channel. He puts together great matches. He also has that connection with Carew and a couple of those other great players from UCLA. What's that one guy's name? Govend? You know that one?
Yeah, Govinanda,
Yeah, that one. And he's got Clay
Clay
Thompson, right?
Thompson, Stowe.
I mean, he's got amazing players over there, and he does a great job. Some that I've done on my channel and it's performed well on my channel. Interesting matches between females and males. That's done really well on Winston's channel. That is done well on my channel. I'm going to continue to do more of that because I think it's fun to do, to have a female pro playing 4.5 or 5.0. I think that's a fun thing to watch. But yeah, that's doing well. But to say that matches in general on YouTube are doing well, I don't know if I would say that because there are so many channels now putting up matches, and I don't know if everyone is getting views. I know Winston is, but I'm not sure if everybody's getting views. So I don't know. It's tricky, Like I think there's got to be some kind of storyline and some kind of connection to the person that's putting up the matches. If it's just a random match, I don't know if people care to watch a random like 4-5 play another random 4-5. Like there are some channels that are on the up and up, like that winners only. You know the guy? Like he does.
I don't know him personally, but I think we follow each other or something else.
Yeah, so that he's doing well. I think his videos get a lot of views. And he puts matches up. So I think people have a connection to him. So that I think it can work through that avenue. But to say that recreational tennis matches are a big hit on YouTube, I don't know if you can just say that. I don't think so. There has to be a certain aspect to it to make it interesting, I think.
I agree. I think it's always like you have to build a brand like Winston did, for example, like his personal brand. He's putting himself out there all the time, as well as featuring others, which I think is a good recipe, And then trends on social media are always short. Like, so if there's a trend for that, like 2 weeks later, it's a trend for something else. So you can't really just latch onto one thing. You have to kind of live in the moment and experiment. I think that's the only way to go about it. Makes sense, at least to me in my head. So for like the Pro Tour, we talked about that before, like some general predictions. Now you made your Curious video, which was interesting and quite successful. He always drags ice to his statements. Like I always used to be a big fan of him, and because I think he brings new people to tennis, and he's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Sometimes his statements lately have been like, I'm getting like, okay, this tennis IQ that pissed me off. Like it's sometimes too bluntly just to get eyeballs, It can irk me a little bit, but overall, like, okay, I enjoy him being on the tour, but sometimes you get frustrated.
So the big question is whether he's saying that just to get attention, or that's truly how Nick is, or some people said that he was actually joking when he said the IQ thing. I don't think so. I didn't have humor because he was asked to build a perfect player, and he gave serious answers, I thought. Did you listen to the podcast?
No, I didn't listen to the podcast.
I just saw like I listened
excerpts.
To it. Yeah, I listened to it. I didn't detect humor. Look, I think it's my opinion that what we're seeing is Nick. That's the real guy. I think Nick, the commentator, that's where he kind of puts himself a little bit more in check and like watches what he says a little bit more.
Yeah, he's
But I
good at
think
that.
but I
That's why I
think
think
the
when he's
Nick,
at his best, you know.
look, I don't want to get into too deep with it because I made a promise not to talk about a Nick like in too much detail, but some of the private things that I've seen from Nick, they're out there on the internet. I think the Nick that we're seeing, like, that's the real Nick. You know, I don't think that's anything to gain attention. That's just the way he is. You know, that's the real him. The Nick that we see on the court, the Nick that we see like on social media, that's the real him. That's my opinion. I think that's the
Yeah,
real
but I
him.
mean, like it's tougher to play a role than to be yourself, like generally. Like
Yeah,
so, I think it makes
absolutely.
sense in that sense. And then you can like him or not. You know, it's up to you, really.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think of about like if you look at the ATP tour? Like, I mean, I'm an Alcaraz fan, of course. This year was up and down. Sinner was the dominating guy in the end, although they both won 2 slams each. You know,
Yeah.
but where do you think we are in the terms of like the tour for next year? Like, do you think tennis is in a great place with these guys, or do you see these doping stories as being a problem for the media and for the popularity of the sport, for example?
I think the doping stories are horrible for the sport. I think both Yannick and Iga are innocent, 100%. Listen, especially in Iga's case, you know, melatonin, like there's a lot of people that take that. Here in the United States, you don't even need a prescription for that. So that was tainted and it's not her fault. But Yannick, it's hard to understand why the physio and the fitness trainer were so careless to spray that stuff on a wound and then give him a massage. It makes no sense. But I believe both stories. I believe the doctors and the scientists that have studied this case in great detail. I choose not to believe the conspiracy theorists on X that are saying that everybody's doped up to the gills. I told a story in one of my recent Monday morning rants where I was flying to Europe. I had the misfortune of sitting next to a guy in a plane who, for the entire time, was telling me about doping, how Federer is doped up, Nadal is doped up. And I'm like, you don't know that. This is speculation. So I chose to believe that there are some people that are doping, but I think it's mostly players that are lower ranked. So there is doping in tennis. I think if we compare the modern game versus the old school game, it is my impression that players are intaking more things now than they ever have before. There's a lot of prescription medication is being taken, you know, so it's a little bit tricky. I do think they're taking more, but I still choose to believe, call me naive, that it's a clean sport. And I do believe that these organizations that are in place are doing a good job at testing these players a lot. And when somebody gets caught, they ban them and they have a protocol that they follow. And I think it's a pretty good system. I refuse to believe that everybody's doped up to the gills. You know, I refuse to believe that.
Yeah, I don't believe that either. I think that's like there's too many conspiracy people around. Like, just if there's any extreme story that's gonna have a negative like they're just gonna jump on it. Like, yeah, I believe this too because I'm angry about something. Like, it's usually something they're angry about in their own life. That's my general opinion. It's like
Exactly.
you can believe some conspiracy if you want, but
For sure.
overall, if you're like a guy that jumps on every conspiracy, you should check yourself. Right? You should probably look into how you're feeling and what's going on in your life, because I think this is not a good sign of mental health.
For sure. But to answer your question, you asked the state of tennis. I think the tennis is in a great place. Unfortunately, there's only a couple of guys that are holding it together. I said recently in a video, I think if it wasn't for Sinner and Alcaraz, if the top three in the world were Zverev, Medvedev, and Fritz, you know, obviously these are unbelievable players. I'm not disrespecting them by any means. These are incredible players, but compared to the big three, it's obviously that they're not at the same level. And the big three came prior to this, what we have now. So the fact that we have Sinner and Alcaraz is a blessing. And these two guys are creating so much excitement. And of course, there are other characters on tour that super popular and people love to watch, but Sinner and Alcaraz are the real deal. So much excitement in Italy, and it doesn't matter what country you're from. you gotta love Alcaraz. He's just so fun to watch. So I think tennis is in a great place right now, with Djokovic still being there, with some of the other guys that are going to be challenging Sinner and Alcaraz. I think the tour is going to be fun in 2025.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. I like a positive overall. Like, I mean, hopefully we can put this doping stuff behind us and focus on
Yeah,
the
hopefully.
tennis because
Yeah,
tennis is in a pretty good spot. Like, I mean, you can argue, okay, with the Nadal Federer rivalry, there's been better years, but overall, with Novak still going for 25, that's an exciting storyline. Alcaraz Sinner has like a strong rivalry. They won 2 each. Now, what will happen this next year? And then you have some like outsiders. Like I like this Mpechi Perry card, like with the huge serve, like one-handed backhand, like kind of a fascinating player to watch. Can he make some big upsets? So there's a lot of storylines that you can enjoy, you know, and then like same on the WTA tour, there's like Sabalenka, Iga.
amazing.
How's that going to turn out? So there's lots to look forward to.
The big four, right? The big four on the WTA is crazy. It's going to be fun. But like, what is your opinion? Don't you think that there's a system in place that catches players that are doping? Like they have to do doping tests all the time. Like, do you think that's all like fake and stuff? And didn't they, after all, catch both Sinner and Iga, who are like at the top of the game, that did catch them and open up a case against them? And then it was proven that, you know, they were innocent. But doesn't that show that there's a system in place that catches if players are doping, and that tells you that most players are not, you know? Don't you think
No,
that's
I completely like knowing few players in top 50, you know, and that's why I talk to them, right? And I know that I have to be home at 10, you know, if you have a dinner, I have to be home at 10, they might show up. Because they have to like sign an hour every day where they have to be home. And I know people who like, they wouldn't take anything, you know, at all.
Right.
So I think most people are like that. There might be some that try to like cheat the system, whatever, but like you said, I believe more that it's kind of lower down when there's like, let's try everything. And if it doesn't work, I'm banned, but that's fine. But like, if you're a top 5 player and you start like trying to cheat, it seems like a risky game, you know, like why would you risk this? You know, you're making millions on sponsorships and stuff. Why would you risk putting a substance? It makes no sense logically.
And, you know, I don't know, we're going to get into an area that's so complicated, but of course you can gain, like as far as endurance and stuff, you could gain a big advantage by taking stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still a skill-based sport. And the skills that these players build over many, many years through incredibly hard work, that's why they're at the top of the game. So it's the skills of someone like Sinner and Alcaraz, the reason why they're at the top. And to gain a small advantage, like you said, it's not worth the risk. And for that reason, I don't think they would ever dare to do anything like that.
No, I don't like, generally, like I'm a positive guy. I'm trying to be an optimist about life. And I try to always err on the naive side, you know? So if I find out that I'm wrong about being naive, I'd rather be wrong about being naive than being like, I think badly of everything and everyone. And these organizations, they don't do their job. I really believe like one reason like that, you know, we had 2 world number ones, one very recent former world number one and one that is current world number one on WTA ATP. Like, if the system was rigged, they wouldn't even get to this far, you know, they would be like, oh, no, let's not try that. The reason they can appeal these cases is that they have the legal system, they have the money, so they can quickly move like within these 10 days, whatever it is, from the WADA and all these organizations. So like they have an advantage in that case, which maybe you have to look into from that point of view. But overall, it's not like they, you know, they're number ones because they're cheating, you know, it's like, that's not, in my opinion, how it works.
No, that's
so I
my
think
point. That's my point.
Funny,
they're number one. Yeah, they're number one because they have the highest skill level out of everyone. Whether the skill is physical or is the technique, they have the highest skill, and that's why they're number one. Could they gain an advantage in endurance? Because strength is irrelevant in tennis. You're not going to gain more by building muscle. Of course, you know, the legs can build some muscle there, can help you come faster. But muscles in the upper body is irrelevant. So like the whole bodybuilder thing is like irrelevant in the game of tennis. I think what you could compare it to is like cycling, right? Where they take these endurance, you know, substances, illegal ones. You could make an argument that could help tennis. It certainly could. At the end of the day, these players, they have endurance naturally because they've done this their whole life. They've played countless 3-set matches. They've been practicing since they were very young for many, many hours in a day. They trained their whole life to be able to play a 5-set match. And the risk of ruining your career by taking something where you gain a small little advantage, something that you can do naturally, I think it's not worth it. And it's for that reason that I believe that the greatest players in the history of the game, in the history of the tennis game, are indeed clean. That's my belief.
That's the feeling I want to have as well. Like,
call me naive. I don't care.
Yeah, we're both two naive guys. I think this is fine. Yeah, because like I rather have that glass half full perspective on my world view. I think I'm happier that sense, and it's not being naive because you're trying to like read up and understand like if something is fishy or not. But in this case, I think it's unfortunate for tennis. That's why I would like it to just move on. I understand some players who got stuck in this thing and they feel like they're, they don't have the same financial powers to fight the system or whatever. I understand them, but overall for tennis, bigger picture, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, but it's such a hot topic. I don't know if you ever talk about this, but it's such a hot topic. People are very opinionated about this, and there's a lot of people that think that everybody's doping.
Yeah, I know the people like who think that, and I get them in my comments if I just like repost something that's not about doping, but like about Sinner or this doping, and this is kind of related to also what we talked about with Kyrgios because he called out like Sinner, very recently, right? So then that's a typical thing he would do, and that's probably his just genuine opinion, which is fair, but it's a hot topic.
I respect that Nick is anti-doping. I respect that. I am too, but I don't think what he's saying about Sinner is like factually accurate. I don't know if he's familiarized himself with the case. Like I made a video about it. I read the whole thing and listen, the story to me makes sense. And it's the substance that was in his system was not going to give him an advantage anyway. Okay. So that's like hard facts. Okay. So those are the facts. So to say that, that Sinner is not clean and Sinner is a doper and all this, it's just not fair. It's just not fair to Sinner. Not fair to Iga, but unfortunately, like this is just a bad label on tennis. It's the worst thing for tennis that can happen. And when I saw, sorry, cut you off, but when I saw the Sinner news, I just made a Monday morning rant, and it was about the Cincinnati tournament. And then I heard the news, and I was like, no, this is the worst. This is the worst. I hate this. And then when I heard the thing about Iga, I thought this is horrible, horrible news. It's just terrible for tennis. I hate to see that. Even though they're completely innocent, it's still a shame because I know what's going to happen. It's going to be for years now. People just commenting this stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah, it gets stuck really quickly in the zeitgeist and people are like, okay, this guy, I don't care what he wins because he's just been doping. It's like such a naive way also on that side of like, just writing stuff up and off and then without checking, reading all that's available to you or listening to some podcast which is very detailed information. Yeah, I also try to do that. I try to actually read up like what are the rules, how are they different, how does WADA work, how does the IAIA or whatever it's called work and stuff like that. So I personally have an understanding of that in case someone asks me. I don't do any specific content first time I really talk about it, but I feel like, I want to be, knowing what I feel about it. That's my take.
Look, the only thing that's fishy with the Sinner case is who's taking the blame between Ferrara and Naldi, right? Between the physio and the fitness trainer. Because they both are claiming different things. And on top of that, I think it was Ferrara who was like, he owned a pharmacy or something like that. And he's the one that had the spray that was known to have the substance. So that's where it's like, I'm glad Sinner got a new physio and fitness trainer because like they were just too careless, They were just careless. They were just playing with fire. And I made a similar point to Iga, and a lot of people were upset what I said. And the context was my natural lifestyle, where a lot of doctors that I consult with recommend to not to take sleeping pills and just to go through a natural sleep cycle. The body will fall asleep. And that's my personal belief that I have gathered from getting advice from my doctor. So when I talked about Iga's case, I said that, she took a risk by taking that melatonin. She just tried to fall asleep naturally. And I shouldn't have said that because people were then complaining about that, in the comments. So look, I understand pressures that these players are dealing with. For you guys that don't know, and I'm going to say this because this is a public information, Becker said this. Becker used to drink hard liquor to fall asleep. Did you know this, Jonas?
I've heard about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
a friend of
hard
mine
liquor.
was his agent for a while, right?
Hard liquor to be able to fall asleep. Because Becker was like Elvis Presley in Germany. He was an absolute superstar, and there was a lot of pressure on him. He guy's under a lot of pressure too, and this is tough. So, look, I get it. But my point was in that video, as someone who lives a natural lifestyle, like why risk it? Just try to be as natural as possible. You know what I mean? Like it's just too much of a risk. But again, this is something what Andy Roddick said on his podcast. Like, who doesn't take melatonin? I guess it's something that a lot of people use. I personally don't, but it's not really anything crazy. Like you can pick it up at the store, and that's basically what she took. So, it's just very, very unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that this happened to these two great players. So I'm a big fan of both Iga and Yannick. I'm a huge fan of them. I think they're great for the game. So, the thing with Yannick, I thought that it was gonna disappear. This thing, I talked about it like after Cincinnati. I made the Monday morning rant, and then I found out the news. I was in shock, and then I made a couple of videos about the whole doping thing. And then the U.S. Open started, and I thought that as he would win, the story would disappear. And to some extent it did, but then again, it didn't. Because of social media, because of trolls, because of haters, it didn't disappear. It's still there, and it'll be there forever. And that's why this is such a shame. It'll be there forever. It's always that label, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's like the headlines is what gets stuck. It's not like people are out clicking and reading. They're like just seeing the headline and they move on with their day. And in their head now, it's like, okay, he's a doper. Like, so that is the issue with media, right? Like, it's just like you see headline, that's it. Okay, I made my mind, and then you move on. It's not like you're trying to do research or stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to get into before we have to quit is that your hero Rafa Nadal, he had this last few months, like very recently, he quit in Malaga or retired in Malaga here. I didn't get to see it because everything was sold out, obviously. But what did you think of his decision to retire? Was kind of forced upon him. Of course, he still loves tennis. What did you think of the retirement, and how important is Rafa for you as a player?
It's the most important player ever for me. It's my favorite player of all time, and he will always be my favorite tennis player. He's the only player I own like merch. By Rafa merch. I have Rafa hats, Rafa shirts. I do have a Djokovic jacket though. Not necessarily because I'm a huge Djokovic fan, because it's a nice Lacoste jacket. It does have a Djokovic logo on it. But yeah, no, I love Nadal so much. And in these years that I've been a huge fan of Nadal, I've built friendships with other huge fans, and we keep in touch. And one of these fans is a guy who I had on my channel last year in the 10-day tennisman transformation, Felipe from Brazil. He's a super fan of Nadal, and we talked this entire year on what the perfect ending would be for Nadal. And I'm a little bit more optimistic. I was dreaming of titles, and I was dreaming of a glorious ending. And he was a little bit more reserved in his predictions. And I'll be really honest, it couldn't have been any worse than the way it ended up. Not that it matters. It doesn't ruin Nadal's legacy one bit. It makes absolutely no difference. The guy was number one in the world in 22. Only 2 years ago, he was number one in the world. Won 2 slams. Doesn't matter at all. But it couldn't have gone any worse. Think about it. He's got a guy following him in Spain, following his footsteps. That's an unbelievable player. Maybe one of the best players that we've ever seen. Combination of him, Federer, and Djokovic, like an amazing player. He's following his footsteps. He respects Nadal tremendously and decides to play doubles with him at the Olympics, which is being held at Roland Garros. Couldn't have been written any better, right, Jonas?
No,
I
was
thought these guys were going to medal. I thought they were going to medal. They didn't. Got taken out by Raymond Krajicek. And I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed. I wasn't disappointed with Rafa singles at the French or at the Olympics. There's no way he was going to beat Zverev or Djokovic. No way. His level declined a lot this year. But I still thought that covering half a court and having Alcaraz on the side was going to result in a medal at the Olympics. It didn't. But then I was super excited for the Davis Cup. I was so excited for that because, again, it was going to be Alcaraz hooking Rafa up, not only in doubles, but also in singles. And there was going to be other guys there. Batista Agut just won a tournament. He was on fire. I thought Spain had a great team to make it to the final. I didn't think they were going to beat Italy in the final, but in the bottom half of the draw, if they would have beaten Netherlands, they would have played Germany in the semis. I thought the final was going to be possible. But again, it just wasn't meant to be. It just wasn't meant to be. Kraz and Grano, how do you say his name? I call him
Granollers, yeah.
Whatever his name is. How do you say it?
Granollers, I think, yeah.
Granollers?
The double L is a J, right?
That's very difficult.
Yeah.
They ended up not winning, the doubles. That was a tough pill to swallow, man, because Rafa was out. You can't expect Rafa. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I didn't expect Rafa to win that singles against Botic. I didn't expect that because, he just was lacking matches. He hasn't played for a long time. But the doubles, I thought that was such a disappointment. Not that Alcaraz didn't try. He tried his hardest. But that Kohlhoff. I mean, if you want an advertisement for a double specialist, that guy played one of the best doubles matches that I've ever seen in my life. Kohlhoff was on absolute fire that match. It was amazing to watch. And he won that match single-handedly. Of course, Botic was there and, but Kohlhoff was the man on that court, including Alcaraz, he was the best man. And it was just disappointing for me. It was very sad. It was very sad. I was very affected by that. And because I, accepted that Nadal was going to be done, but I wanted a nice ending, and it was just not meant to be this year. It was just not meant to be.
No, I think I shared it. I mean, I was watching with the guy I played with today, Adri, in the pub. I think we had some food and then we went there and just to watch the end. But first of all, I was surprised that they didn't put Nadal and Alcaraz only in doubles. I thought that would have been more logical. I can understand there is some reasoning, but Nadal has indoors against Botic, it seemed like just uphill, and that not having that possible finale with Nadal and Alcaraz, I think was a bit of a shame.
Such a tough call. I don't blame I don't blame Ferrer because he wanted to give Nadal one final match.
Singles,
one final singles match. I don't blame him because what if it was a freak thing and he put Nadal in doubles and then Spain goes down 2-0?
Yeah, it doesn't play. Yeah, so that's maybe that was maybe not an option.
You want to risk that? You can't risk that. Even though that's probably not going to happen, but you never know. It's indoors. Alcaraz's least favorite surface. So,
I think Nadal was tough.
It was okay. Yeah, it was okay to put him in singles. I don't know, but I think Nadal should have played doubles too. Should have back to back.
Yeah, this is the last match. Come on, just do it. Even if you lose, at least you try.
But just when Nadal lost with Federer at the Labour Cup, that was bummed too. I would have bummed me out big time. Yeah. I don't know if it bummed you out, but I wanted
bummed me out as well. That they lost. They had, I think they had match point, right? Or something.
Yeah, Federer had a forehand. I remember he had a running forehand from, he was on the outside. He had a running forehand from the middle of the court. He dumped it into the net, if I remember correctly. Yeah. It was on match points.
Yep, I remember it.
It hurt so much. I wanted him to finish his career with a blistering forehand winner and win the last match with Nadal. But at the end of the day, who cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter one bit. It doesn't make any difference. But, it's just a little bit, makes it a little bit tough. Losing your last match is a little bit tough. It's like I said in some other videos, you want to go out like Sampras or like Jordan when he retired the first time by winning. That's the best way to do it. The best way to do it. And that brings up the question, what about Djokovic? What if he would have called it after the Olympics? What if Rafa would have called it after winning the French in 22? I don't know. These are good questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the thing with after the Olympics, I thought he would possibly call it. I mean, he's obviously not super pumped maybe to play like the thousands anymore. Like he has a bucket load of them already.
Yeah.
However, like I think he wants 25. I think he's like really like he wants the record. Like I think quite badly. So I think he will go hard to win a slam this year, like hard. And yeah, he wants to beat Margaret Court. Like that when he's done that, he's gonna be like, "Ciao, guys! I don't need to do this anymore."
That's right.
I think that's it. Yeah, for him.
Well, let me tell you something, Jonas. I haven't really thought about next season yet. It's too early. I want to see Brisbane. I think Djokovic is going to be there. I'm curious too. I want to see some of those warm-up tournaments. I think it's going to be very tough for Djokovic. I do think so. I have to analyze how he does in some of those warm-up tournaments and then just make a call prior to the Australian Open. But it's scary how Sinner beat him the last 3 times they played. It's scary, you know?
Yeah, I think like Djokovic can still pull it out against Alcaraz, but like a Sinner in decent shape, it's gonna be tough. Yeah, I think Djokovic is a closer match at least. Maybe like 50-50, 60-40, whatever. Yeah.
The one guy that I have on my radar big time is Zverev. That's one guy I have on my radar big time. I can already get that. I think he's going to be. He played incredibly well, but I think there's a few things that he can do even better in 2025. It's going to be super tough for Djokovic to win a Grand Slam, I think. I think he can do it, yeah, for sure. But it's going to be very tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Zverev might win his first this next year. I believe for sure Sinner and Alcaraz will win each. And then we see maybe one more for Novak or one extra for the other guys. But I think Zverev won next.
Jonas, you know what adds to the difficulty for Jonas is his ranking. I mean, for Novak, I said Jonas. What adds to the difficulty of Novak going deep in slams is the quarterfinals are going to be absolutely brutal. If he's going to be ranked 7, that means
I think he needs to win some tournaments, like smaller tournaments.
He's going to have to be. Yes, he has to be ranked top 5, like ideally top 4.
Yeah, because he needs to pick up like Brisbane or something to get quickly up the ranks a bit.
Now, if he drops out of the top 8, then it's even worse. So you don't want Sinner or Alcaraz in the 4th round or the quarters. You don't want that as Novak. That's going to be tough. Because I feel like Novak peaks towards the end of a Grand Slam. That's where he peaks. He needs a little bit of time to work himself into a Grand Slam to find his best tennis, So when you play like one of these guys, there's something that he hasn't experienced in a long, long time, playing like a top guy early. It's going to be interesting to see how he does. Like, let's see this. Let's see how many tournaments he plays. Number one, how he does in those tournaments, where his ranking is, and we go from there. But what I've heard, Novak wants to keep going. I don't hear anything that sounds like retirement. He's pumped and ready to go. Like, he took it easy towards the end of this year, but he's ready to go next year. That's what I've been hearing. So let's see. It's going to be fun.
And he has Murray now for the first slam as well. So that's quite an exciting story. That's extra spice to it.
And Murray is a major, like, he's like, I'm not saying this as an insult, but he's like a tennis nerd. I think Murray is super into like analytics. There's great stories that Andy Roddick tells on his podcast about Andy Murray being so into the numbers, and Andy Roddick not at all. He goes more by feel, but Andy Murray looks at everything, There's a story that Andy told about Murray renting out some kind of high-tech equipment and just studying his shots in great depth. And he was so excited about it. And he was telling Andy, and Andy couldn't care less, because he doesn't care about any of that. It just goes by feel. So, look, I think sometimes that going a little too much into detail can backfire as a coach. Other times it can be very useful. It depends how you use the information that you collect. Generally, I think being as informed as possible is fantastic. It's great. But sometimes, too much information can confuse you as well, So we'll have to see how he is as a coach. It's hard to say that he's going to be, people are saying he's going to be a great coach. We don't know.
No, he's not.
Being a great player doesn't mean that you're going to be a great coach. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, exactly. And he's not done it before. I mean, also this is Novak.
Right.
Novak is Like my
Right.
friend has been in his team for a bunch of years, and like Novak is not that easy to be in his team. You know, he demands
Right.
a lot because he demands a lot from himself. So we'll see, you know, how
Yeah.
their relationship also evolves, because now they're going to be on the same team, and I don't think it's going to be as easy peasy as it looks on paper. You know, we will see, but it will be kind of fascinating to watch it.
Sure. It's going to add to the drama for sure.
Yeah. All right, Nikola, I have to go because I have a tennis club dinner I have to get to.
Jonas, thank you for having me on. This was great. I appreciate it.
A pleasure as always, man. Like, it's always fun when you have time to jump on.
You take care, man. All right, take it easy. Bye-bye.